At the very moment I record this, there is a ceasefire in place between three hostile parties: Israel, Iran, and the US. They've all agreed to stop fighting. We don't know how long that'll last because it's already been breached at least once. And maybe by the time you watch this video, it'll have been compromised again. But if there's any lasting value at all to any tenuous peace, it will only have been because all three sides found their own unique path to victory. As in, while it's tempting to think that there are clear winning and losing sides, and maybe there are, it's important for each side to be able to claim a win. And I'll show you how.
Generations from now, history will record that our generation stood its ground, acted in time, and secured our common future.
Israel's stated objective has been very simple: weaken Iran to the point where it no longer poses an imminent threat to Israel. That involved neutralizing two things: Iran's nuclear program and its stockpile of ballistic missiles. Israel would argue it has now done both.
I want to assure the civilized world, we will not let the world's most dangerous regime get the world's most dangerous weapons.
Over the span of a week, Israel targeted several of Iran's key nuclear facilities. That includes Natanz. That's the country's primary uranium enrichment site, where thousands of centrifuges make the explosive material that would go into a nuclear bomb. Israel has done heavy damage to its above-ground enrichment plant and claims to have heavily damaged its underground centrifuges as well. Israeli airstrikes have killed more than a dozen Iranian nuclear scientists, and they've targeted the country's ability to launch the kind of missile that could theoretically carry a nuclear warhead.
They went after missile stockpiles, they went after missile launchers, for sure. They also just, without sort of destroying them kinetically, they just absorbed a lot of missiles that Iran tried to lob at Israel that didn't work.
Israel has also targeted dozens of Iran's most senior military leaders: the commander-in-chief of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Armed Forces Chief of Staff, as well as its deputy commander. Just three among those leaders who were eliminated, according to Israel's Air Force. And Iran's supreme leader himself, the Ayatollah, forced into hiding, reportedly swearing off all electronic communication out of fear that those signals could be traced. Never before has Israel attacked Iran so directly at such scale. In all, Iran's health authority says hundreds have been killed, thousands injured.
We're talking about multiple sites being hit, nuclear, military facilities, prominent Iranian military officials, and some of the key nuclear scientists being assassinated.
The totality of that has never happened before.
And what's worth pointing out is that Benjamin Netanyahu has managed to do this with the support and approval, maybe in part because of the support and approval, of the most powerful country on the planet. For Israel, that's vindication. It has spent the last 30 years, most of those under Netanyahu's rule, trying to convince the US to get more directly involved in the fight against Iran. Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump term number 1, Biden, they all refused to give Israel the 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs it needed to hit Iran's most heavily fortified uranium enrichment site, built hundreds of feet into the earth. But Trump term number 2, he said yes, and even better, the Americans did the job themselves.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history.
And this political high from a war Israel's government believes was so decisively and quickly fought and won, this may be an important turning point in Netanyahu's own domestic political fortunes.
Netanyahu is ruling over, an Israeli society that's extremely divided. And of course, they have a multi-party system with an emphasis on the multi-parts. So Netanyahu leans very heavily on these right-wing supporters in his government. And because it's so divided, losing even a few of them can topple his government. And there was a lot of reporting right up until like the day of the Israeli attack on Iran. They were threatening to walk. I think it certainly put off these kinds of reckonings for Netanyahu for further down the line.
So can Israel emerge from this war by claiming a win? Absolutely it can. But it didn't win everything, and Iran didn't lose everything either. There is no question, Iran sustained heavy losses.
And Israel pounding Iran, hitting missile sites.
You can tell here that this building was badly damaged by an airstrike.
But it also struck back against much stronger military powers. According to Israel's health ministry, Iran's ballistic missile attacks wounded, hospitalized more than 3,000 people. They hit critical infrastructure sites like power stations and oil refineries, even a teaching hospital at a university.
Khamenei has said that the enemy has made a grave mistake, committed a major crime, once again vowing punishment.
And following Operation Midnight Hammer, that's the American bunker-busting bomber strike on Iran's nuclear program, Iran launched a missile strike on a U.S. base in Qatar, the largest such base in the region.
Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard said it made a, quote, powerful and destructive missile attack on a U.S. military airbase in Qatar.
It has the longest runway, and it has been key to our operations, whether in Afghanistan and in Iraq. So this is why they chose Qatar, because Udeid Air Base is one of the most important bases for United States in the greater Middle East, not only in the Middle East, in the greater Middle East.
And this attack would come with a sharp message. From a spokesperson of Iran's armed forces, we warn our enemies that the era of hit and run is over.
جمهوری اسلامی سیلی سختی به گونه آمریکا نواخت. به یکی از پایگاه‌های مهم آمریکا در منطقه پایگاه العدید حمله کرد.
Domestically, they said that they were responding to this horrible aggression by the United States. It was unjustified and a very militaristic message that that tries to draw national pride and attention to the fact that they're sort of sticking it to the man, as it were.
Even Qatar's formal response, its strong condemnation of Iran's attack on the U.S. base in its territory, calling it a flagrant violation of Qatar's sovereignty, underscoring its own right to respond directly. This might have been seen as an Iranian propaganda win, showing the world that its strike was provocative enough to warrant such a fiery response, even if the attack did almost no damage because almost all of the missiles were intercepted.
If the Iranian regime did not retaliate, I think they would be in trouble domestically. Iran also benefits from the rally around the flag effect. Now, that rally around the flag effect probably doesn't last very long if the leaders then just sort of roll over and play dead.
The Islamic Republic's social contract with the society was that it can provide security and safety because it hasn't really provided prosperity. It hasn't provided political participation. It hasn't provided social and cultural freedom. Unlike a lot of other countries in the Middle East that were being bombed or were unstable, Iran was a stable and secure country. And that image is now broken. So the regime definitely needed a demonstration of strength in pushing back against Israel and also to pushing back against the United States.
But maybe more important than Iran's saving face is the question of whether it was able to save its nuclear program.
Early intelligence finds the U.S. strikes perhaps only set Iran's nuclear program back by months.
The U.S. military strikes on 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities last weekend did not destroy the core components of the country's nuclear program.
Both CNN and the New York Times made headlines, citing classified intelligence assessments that perhaps the American midnight strike on Iranian nuclear facilities like Fordo, that's the one buried deep inside a mountain, that maybe it didn't do as much damage as had been hoped or as had been claimed.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
We can see from satellite imagery of the Fordo uranium enrichment facility that there are 2 sets of 3 holes, believed to be the exact points where a series of American bunker buster bombs would have penetrated hundreds of feet below the surface and exploded. But right now, there is no clear confirmation at all, no independent verification of exactly how much damage was caused. Add to that a big question mark around the 400 kilos of enriched uranium that Western intelligence believes Iran has and could turn into nuclear bomb-grade fuel.
Up to 8 to 10 bombs within a matter of weeks. It could probably produce the first bomb's worth in just a matter of days.
And what you're left with is at least the possibility that Iran's greatest threat to its enemies may have survived.
Strikes cannot destroy the knowledge Iran has acquired over several decades, nor any regime ambition to deploy that knowledge to build a nuclear weapon.
Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success.
In a lot of ways, Israel's win is America's win. They are friends. They share many of the same enemies, and both have vowed never to allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon.
America's commitment to ensuring Iran never obtains a nuclear weapon.
As long as I'm President of the United States, Iran will not get a nuclear weapon.
Necessary to send a focused message to the Iranian government, and that is, your desires for a weapon are unacceptable.
So to whatever extent they may have managed to set back Iran's nuclear program over the course of the last week and a half, they would share in that victory. But Donald Trump has two other goals that I think are relevant here. The first is about projecting power.
There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close.
I haven't seen anybody really dispute that what the U.S. military did to Iran when it flew 7 heavy bombers carrying more than 400,000 pounds of explosives across the Atlantic Ocean directly to Iran with the intent of attacking the country's most heavily fortified nuclear facilities, everybody seems to believe that was quite a feat, to strike in secret a quarter of the way around the world without suffering any casualties whatsoever. And for Trump to point out, as he did on Truth Social, how utterly ineffective Iran's retaliatory strike in Qatar really was, actually thanking them for it, highlighting the early notice it gave as to when and where the attack was coming. Such is American might, that even its enemies see their own aggression as purely symbolic.
President Trump wants to primarily demonstrate that he is serious when he says that there are two options, that you either deal with us or you're going to get bombed, that he has the credibility of standing on that position. The president is trying to demonstrate to rivals like Russia and China that the U.S. not only has the will, but an awesome capability to weaken its adversaries.
But for Donald Trump, being able to claim victory also appears to be very personal. His social media account lately has been filled with self-congratulatory images, trumpeting his achievements, defying his opponents, and depicting himself as larger than life, a hero. His posts often read like they are direct appeals to world leaders, his way of reaching out and telling them what he likes, what he doesn't like, creating an impression that he only needs to speak or write reality into existence. And much of what he writes these days is about Trump, the peacemaker.
He wants to build a legacy, right? Solving problems and then getting immense credit for that. He wants to do stuff that's grand. That's what I sort of see as like the through line.
And just so you don't think any of this is an exaggeration, Trump has said repeatedly that he should win the Nobel Peace Prize.
I was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize.
They will never give me a Nobel Peace Prize. I deserve it.
They should give me the Nobel Prize for Rwanda and, if you look, the Congo.
And in fact, one of his staunchest Republican supporters, a congressman from Georgia, has just formally nominated him for the Nobel Prize. And Trump is likely well aware of the lineup of people wanting to thank him for his service.
President Trump, I thank you. The people of Israel thank you. The forces of civilization thank you.
So let it be said, no matter how lopsided the actual outcome of this war may be, what may allow it to end is that all sides feel they've asserted themselves and made a point. But peace is precarious.
This ceasefire is as fragile as it gets because Iran, bruised and wounded, would be keen on reconstituting its nuclear program and its offensive and defensive capabilities. Unless President Trump is able to now use the maximum leverage that he has created for the United United States into a lasting diplomatic settlement, then he was only made a bad situation worse.
It's true, the state of play can turn dramatically on a dime. What seemed like wins today could quickly become losses overnight. And for whatever victories Israel or the US may claim, Iran's ruling regime, for the time being, has survived. So even if and when the war does end, it's not really over.